Welcome to the Season 2 finale of Brewing the Facts. I'm your host and homebrewer, Anthony Otso, and today I will be adding the priming sugar and bottling this Scottish export ale, which is modeled off of the 7th Doctor in classic Doctor Who. For those who still don't know, or living under a rock, it's called Fenric's Revenge, a roasty peaty and malty Scotch ale. I'll also get to drink the first sips of this beer at the end of the episode and tell you just what I think of my own creation. But before I get to the bottling and all that, let's jump right into the last topic to be featured this season, a journey in time to discover the history of Oktoberfest. We begin in Munich. It is October 12th, 1810, and the marriage of the Crown Prince Ludwig to Princess Therese von Sachsen-Hildburghausen. Princess Therese was born July 8, 1792 to Duke Frederick of Saxe-Altenburg and Duchess Charlotte Georgine of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. She was first listed as a potential bride for Napoleon, who was looking for an heir after Empress Josephine didn't give birth to a child. France had just imposed the Treaty of Schönbrunn over Austria in October 1809, and Napoleon was looking for someone to give him a son. But instead of Princess Therese, Napoleon eventually went with Archduchess Mary Louise to give him that son. But it wasn't that Napoleon said no to Therese. Instead, Therese was snatched up that same year by Prince Ludwig. Ludwig visited her family from December 21st to 24th, 1809, and chose her instead of the younger sister, which was a surprise to many. In less than a year, they were married, and Bavarians cheered as she came to Munich. The wedding took place at the court chapel of the Munich resident, and the next evening began the celebration. And this was no ordinary celebration. The entire city of Munich was covered in lights. Illuminated paintings and writings were also put on the buildings. The upper 6,000, who were a part of the National Guard, and their families were invited to dance and eat at 4 different restaurants. The rest of the city was entertained outdoors at 4 different locations, and there was a lot of food and drink. It is said that there were 3,992 pounds of Swiss cheese, 400 kilos of mutton, 13,300 pairs of smoked sausage, all free. Also, 232 hectoliters of beer and 4 hectoliters of Austrian white wine were available. Now that sounds like a party. Entertainment-wise, 150 musicians played and 2 theaters also opened for free. This went on for 5 days, culminating with the folk festival that included a horse race where Franz Baumgartner was awarded a gold medal for winning. This horse race was actually created specifically for this celebration. Now that's a wedding. You got 5 days of celebration, a horse race, why not? Of course, Ludwig became King Louis in 1825 and Therese became the Queen of Bavaria. But they were treated as such already with this raucous celebration that would live on longer than they could have possibly imagined. That horse race was held in an open area known as the Theresienwiese, which is translated as Therese's Meadow. This area is now a fairground that still holds Oktoberfest celebrations in Munich to this day. And of course, that wedding certainly sounds better than the cake-filled crappy dance music, American traditional nonsense we see rampant today. I mean, if weddings were like Oktoberfest, I would certainly be crashing one every single week. As we begin bottling, we must first make sure that the beer is filtered from the secondary to the bottling bucket, as you see here. This is to remove the dead yeast and the hops that we let sit in the beer to give us an aroma. The bottling bucket also gives us an easy vessel to eventually bottle the beer. And while we will end up with about 48 bottles of beer from this batch, there is much more beer than that consumed during Oktoberfest. It is estimated that 2 million gallons are consumed each year during the festival. But how did Oktoberfest evolve from a wedding to a yearly event? Year after the wedding of Ludwig and Therese, it became clear that the people wanted another time for celebration and community, and of course to consume cheese, meat, and beer. No royal wedding meant the people needed a new organizer, so the Bavarian Agricultural Association decided to take the reins. The horse race remained, and a state agricultural fair was created so the association could show off its products and innovations. This went on for 2 years before the event was cancelled in 1813 due to the Wars of Liberation. Napoleon and France were the rulers at this time. But the harshness of the last treaty and an invasion of Russia eventually caused several countries to band together to try and oust them once and for all. The last few wars ended in defeat, but the sixth time was the charm. Austria, Prussia, Russia, Spain, the UK, Portugal, Sweden, Sardinia, and some German states defeated France and drove Napoleon into exile on Elba. Makes you wonder if this would have happened if Napoleon did end up marrying Therese several years back. Once everything settled down and societies got back to normal, the agricultural fair returned in 1814 and continued with private funding until 1819, which is when we get the first glimpse of Oktoberfest. In 1818, booths were built to serve food and drink, and the city officials in Munich realized that the revenue coming in was massive, with the big crowd and wealthy individuals joining in on the fun. So in 1819, the city decided to make Oktoberfest a yearly event, and the rest is history. Fast forward to the late 20th century, and Oktoberfest in Munich keeps the essence of the past, but with a modern flair. Instead of booths, the festival now has large beer halls built from plywood with balconies and bandstands. These structures are erected by each brewery in Munich, and they seat about 6,000 people. The city still runs everything, with the mayor of Munich tapping the first keg to get the festivities underway. There are parades with beer wagons and floats that represent the breweries, and people dress in historical folk costumes. The festival has grown significantly, with 6 million people now attending, and the consumption of beer is now around 75,800 hectoliters, or 2 million gallons. Not bad for an event that started off as a wedding more than 200 years ago. Imagine turning your wedding into a yearly festival for a whole city. Now that's an anniversary.
It's crazy to think that each brewery will erect a temporary hall each year at the fairgrounds. The same breweries will have bear wagons, floats and parades representing their brands, of course. And it went from thousands to millions of people since it started, a growth that only continues as tourists visit the original festival even now today. I mean, pretzels and beer and lederhosen and steins, who can resist? Of course, in order for our Scotch ale to be complete, we essentially need carbonation as we bottle. So in order to do that, we are going to dissolve 3.4 ounces of brown sugar, about a half a cup, into 2 cups of water. Once this dissolves, we'll have to cool this off to room temperature and then pour and mix it into our bottling bucket. Now we're ready to bottle. But before we work on all of that, it's time to talk about the challenges and the milestones that helped Oktoberfest become the festival that it is today.
Oktoberfest was under city control starting in 1819, and there is certainly a reason why it continued to grow to what it is today. There are certain milestones that introduced items that would later remain staples, and there were some difficult times that the festival was able to overcome. 1850 marked a time of additional excitement with the statue of Bavaria being unveiled. It is a female personification of the Bavarian homeland and shows off its strength and glory. A hall of fame known as the Ruhmeshalle was also built, along with a stairway. King Ludwig I, the one who started this story, commissioned the project. It was the first statue that was made entirely of bronze since the classical antiquity. It is 60 feet, 9 inches, and weighs nearly 88 tons. The statue rests on a stone base that is almost 9 feet high. Now go back to 1850 and picture yourself one of the locals having a good time celebrating your community, and this statue was unveiled. It certainly would have been good entertainment to marvel in its glory. The next years would not be as great, however, as war and the spread of cholera really made things tough on everyone in Bavaria. But instead of being another casualty, Oktoberfest actually became a beacon of hope for the people, a way to escape the horrors of everyday life. So the festival endured and almost became more important to the city than in years past. This paved the way for the eventual additions that put the festival on the map. In 1881, a roasted chicken outlet opened up. Traditional chicken is still served today. A decade later, we begin to see electricity. Booths and carousels added lighting to become more of a spectacle, mimicking the lit-up city back in 1810 during Ludwig and Therese's wedding. Performers came to play to the large crowds. The demands increased so much that breweries began to set up larger beer tents with stages for musicians. There was a scary moment in recent history when a bomb killed 13 and injured more than 200 people in 1980. One of the victims was the domestic terrorist himself, who was suffering from mental and emotional problems. Oktoberfest was reopened about 12 hours after the attack, with the mayor of Munich at the time, Erich Kiesel, saying, "Neither this state nor this city or its citizens will be held to ransom by criminals. A closure would only support the condemnable intention of the perpetrator. For this reason, we must say, life must go on." Of course, there was the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, with the festivals being postponed for 2 years before finally coming back as well. But the growth of Oktoberfest is one that won't be stopped for long. To put it into perspective, 12,000 hectoliters of beer was consumed during the 100th anniversary in 1910, and now every year sees a new record, including beer consumed, chicken eaten, and overall visitors. In 2010, Oktoberfest had its 200th anniversary, where a second historical festival took place at the south end of Theresienwiese to tie the original wedding setting back in. This historical festival, called Odereisen, now takes place 3 out of every 4 years, only taking off during the still ongoing Bavarian Agricultural Fair.
The original Oktoberfest celebrated its 200th anniversary in 2010. Think about that. That's 2 centuries of festivities. From a wedding to a yearly festival, to a festival with booths, to what is now with rides and games, large wooden buildings, so that people can drink delicious brews and hang out and have a good time. And 2 more centuries, maybe the entire Earth will hold an Oktoberfest, so the aliens can have a good time with us. We could have some flying beer dispensing robots, self-driving hover boots to get us home. Who knows what the future may bring? But seriously, I'm all about, going back to maybe some simpler times of just making some beer, and that's what we're going to be doing here. Man, simpler times. Gotta love them. Obviously, Simpler Times is not a sponsor. The brewery that actually makes that beer out of Trader Joe's, Minhas Brewery, they also have an Oktoberfest type beer as well. But getting back to the present, time to bottle. The key here is to use the bottling tool, which I have in my hand, so that we can fill the beer up, leaving a little room so that the CO2 can build up without blowing up the bottle. That's never happened to me before, but it could happen. Of course, we will then need to seal the beer with caps, and everything has been sanitized here. You got to make sure it's sanitized. I have caps in a bowl with some sanitizer solution, so I can just, do them one at a time. We're now going to store these bottles in a dark, cool place for about 3 weeks to finish the priming. But before we fast forward to let you see the finished beer, as I get to taste this delicious thing, let's finish up our chat about Oktoberfest and the question that's on everyone's mind. Is it true that the Oktoberfest in La Crosse, Wisconsin is now the Midwest's longest running festival? Let's find out.
In the early years of Oktoberfest, it was mostly residents of Munich. Even other parts of Germany didn't see the significance of attending, but with a few moves that added attractions and booths, and the move to have the festival held in September, word started to spread. And this includes the Germans who went to other countries from 1820 to World War II. We could go back to the 1850s in places like St. Louis, Missouri, Cincinnati, Ohio, and even St. Paul, Minnesota, and see photos and stories of the festivities in Munich placed in their newspapers. Oktoberfest was still very much a Munich thing though, with few out-of-towners even traveling to partake in the event. But everything changed after World War II. Americans still stationed in Germany after the war discovered Oktoberfest as they moved their families to the Munich area. There was innovation with travel and better infrastructure for European travelers to go to Munich as well. And then there was a second mass immigration of German people to the United States between 1950 and 1970. There were hundreds of thousands suddenly moving to Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin. One of the first U.S. Oktoberfests was in Berks County, Pennsylvania in the 1940s, and La Crosse, Wisconsin started another in 1961. Per our earlier question, the La Crosse Oktoberfest is the longest running fest in the Midwest. Cincinnati started an Oktoberfest of their own in 1976, and Oktoberfest Cincinnati is now the largest celebration in the United States and one of the largest festivals in the world. And then there is the craft beer boom that began in the 1980s and has now taken off more in the 2010s. Oktoberfest style ales are becoming a staple for the fall and usually are launched around individual brewing company Oktoberfest town celebrations. Munich probably didn't think of this when it started, but because they never trademarked the term Oktoberfest, anyone can brew a beer and name it that. Still, breweries in Germany are profiting from the spread to the US, and much of it is thanks to the Midwest, with restaurants in places like Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota accounting for 50% of the sales sold in kegs in the entire United States. This has many more German companies creating American LLCs to be able to distribute overseas. And yes, drinking out of a 2-liter boot probably helps those sales.
Oktoberfest also spread to other places through the decades. Ontario, Canada has the Waterloo Oktoberfest Festival. Argentina and Brazil also have their own festivals. And some of the additions and new traditions at these festivals eventually have spread back to Munich. The world spreading ideas through beer. Perhaps that's the secret to peace on earth. Before we close this season, it's time for the moment of truth. The beer tasting. Let's pour. So that beer is definitely one that I enjoy. I'm glad that I made this recipe. I could probably actually up the smoke game a little bit. The smoked peat and the smoked malt both give this subtle smoky flavor, but it probably could be a little more pronounced, so I might adjust accordingly. And that's the one thing to think about when you make these beers. You're gonna brew your beer, you're gonna make your recipe, and you're not always gonna get it exactly how you think that it could be. This beer is very good. I'm very excited about it. I'm proud of it. It's got that nice caramel flavor that you expect in a Scotch ale. That smokiness is there. It's in this like subtle way. It's a very smooth beer. You really taste the flavors from the Edinburgh yeast, a little bit of clove, things like that. There's that spicy, earthy flavor from the hops that I used, and it's mostly an aroma as opposed to just being bitter and like super hop forward. Obviously you don't want that in a Scotch ale, which is why I wanted to dry hop most of it. So, it really came out well. I'm excited about it. There's some good head retention as well. It's not too heavy, but it certainly has this like really good mouth feel to it. You're drinking a beer. I'm excited, and to be honest, after the Oktoberfest episode, to drink it out of a boot, it's the way to go. So I'm gonna be drinking these a lot over these next couple of months, and be passing and sharing these along to my friends so that they could get a little bit of a taste as well. So that does it for season 2 of Brewing the Facts. Can you believe it? This last month went so fast. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and follow me both here on YouTube and on Instagram at eclectic_Yotzo. That's eclectic_IOZZO for more beer talk, some sports talk, and other musings about music, movies, and even books, and of course beer. So until next time, salut! Have a good one. Cheers.